Hello and welcome back to another Teach Tape Tuesday where I go over what makes a good football team. Now, there are many factors that go into a football team, obviously being talent as one, but beyond talent, there's some certain intangibles and certain trends that you see in good teams. Now, you can look at dynasty teams on every level, whether that's high accomplishing high school teams and building a program, whether that's Nick Saban at the college level and building the Alabama dynasty, whether that is at the NFL level looking at the very own Belichick type system. Obviously, every program has their guys, but what makes players go from being great in one spot, being not as good in another spot, and just transcending and creating a real dynamic that allows for winning? Well, I think there are five major things, and I'm going to go over the five things. And with each, I'm going to tell you what it is. I'm going to give you the why, and I'm going to give you some teams that I think exude this trait that really help kind of define like this is why it matters. This is what makes them a good team. And as we get to the video, you'll start to see a trend of teams that appear on this list multiple times. And you tell me, am I wrong? Are there other things I'm not looking for? And whenever you are looking at teams, what do you notice? Um, as for myself, I have played for a long time. I was a coach a couple of years. Um, with different programs at different levels, and you can kind of see the dynamics come to fruition on the field. You can see the energy, you can see how they react to things, you can see their sort of mentality, and you can see how it translates to the four quarters of the game. But to get into the list, number one, run the ball and stop the run. Why? Well, running the ball is essential to controlling what you want to do on offense. And stopping the run can create this one dimensional aspect. If you can know what the other team is doing, or you can be so forceful that the other team has to change what they're doing and what they want to do to stop what you're doing, you open up the game. For both offense and defense, you have the ability to control the flow of the game. If you stop the run well, the offense has to be in more passing downs, they're in longer yardage, they don't have as many free gimme plays. You make everything difficult. You make the offensive coordinator, the quarterback, everyone has to work harder to accomplish getting yards. For the offense, when you run the ball effectively, you keep the defense tired, you keep them on their heels, you make them say, I don't really want to keep doing this. Um, my college team was obviously West Point, as you see back there, and running the ball takes a certain level of dominance that kind of creates the team dynamic and the morale of like we are better than these people, we're more dominant, right? So the why. Control the flow of the game, control the morale of the game, force the other team to be one dimensional. And as we look at team examples, well, let's look at last year. Let's look at some teams that have been good in the past couple of years, and you tell me, do they meet this criteria? Well, the Patriots. The Patriots this year were a new team, but they could run the ball decently. I think they're better whenever they had Henderson and they could be a little more explosive, but they ran the ball and they could stop the run until they met the Patriots or until they met the Seahawks without in the Super Bowl. So that's fine. Next team, the Rams. Well, the Rams are a team that relies on play action and moving people, but you can't do that unless you have the run, and you need the run. But on defense, they stop the run at a pretty decent level. The Seahawks, absolutely great two-man game with Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker. And then obviously on defense, they had one of the best run-stopping defenses in the league. And you saw it in the Patriots game. They forced Drake May to be one-dimensional, and they took away the option of the run, and they kind of dictated the flow of the game. And then next, you have the 49ers. Despite all the injuries, despite Brock Purdy being gone for a little bit, Kittle, the whole Brandon Ayuk drama, the 49ers are consistent because they run the ball, and that's their goal. 2 years ago or 1 year ago, maybe, I had the entire 49ers up to the fifth string running back because Kyle Shanahan knows what to do to control the game by running the ball. The next thing is being not penalized, having high discipline. Now you might say every team should have this, right? They're professionals, or if they're on a lower level, every team should know the rules and try to avoid things. I'm gonna let you in on a secret, right? And anyone that's played can attest to this. There's holding every play. There is roughing the passer, maybe a lot of plays. There's helmet to helmet target. There's a lot of different things. But how do you make sure that you don't get penalized for it? One, it's reputation. So having a good reputation of how you carry yourself on the field will keep you from getting flagged in times of confusion. Um, and then also it's how do you take away the penalties that aren't as visible, that aren't as frequent, like personal fouls, where it's strictly because of your action or your behavior. So why does this matter? Reducing long yardage downs on offense and then free first downs on defense. You don't want to give the other team an advantage in the game, and getting penalized is a clear advantage. Whether it's pass interference or being grabby and not playing with your technique, holding when you don't let go of someone at the right time, a personal foul when you let your temper go. Good teams don't get penalized because you reduce the time you spend on and off the field on offense and defense, and depending on which side of the ball it is, whatever your strength is, you kind of lose out on that. What teams have I seen, right? And I looked up the least penalized teams: the Rams, the 49ers, and the Bengals. Now you see the Rams and 49ers, they're in the other list of running the ball, stop and run. You see a little bit of the trend there. The Bengals are kind of an outlier. Why might that be? Well, they didn't have their best player for most of the year in Joe Burrow. So maybe had they had him, maybe if they didn't have one of the worst defenses in the league, they weren't penalized, but the defense wasn't great. And we'll get into that later, but you kind of see how you can kind of build on who should be good and who should be not as good just based on following this trend. Okay. Number 3, win the games you should win. Having consistency. It is actually kind of hard to watch some NFL games, right? Because you think everyone's a pro, but yet there's still clear gaps in talent. There's clear gaps in coaching. On the collegiate level, there's obviously the tier difference in who plays who. But the number one rule you see is win games you're supposed to win. And I think the important part of that is good teams beat bad teams and occasionally beat good teams, right? But they always beat the bad teams. That's a good team. If you can do that, you're good. If you can't do that, you're fluky, you're inconsistent. Think of the Cowboys on that 3-game streak where it's like they could be Super Bowl contenders and then they just fall off a cliff. You don't know. You didn't know what team you had there. But you win the games you're supposed to, and then the teams that win the games they might not be supposed to win, so like the toss-up games or the games they might not be favored, that's what great teams do. So if you can do both of those, you could be a great team. Some examples of teams that were really consistent and beat the teams they're supposed to beat: the Patriots, the Bills, the Rams, the Seahawks. In games they were favored to win, these teams all had positive records because they beat the teams they're supposed to beat, and they occasionally beat teams they weren't supposed to beat. And when you do that consistently and you build that kind of status and kind of consistency amongst the team, you become a good team, and then you can become a great team. Whenever you're not good, every team in the NFL can be good. It's just how consistent are you that makes you a championship level team. You look at the old dynasty Patriots, they're consistent. You look at Nick Saban, consistency. Nick Saban was the first to say it is about the program. It is not about me. Obviously, Saban's great because he built the program, but you can't just have a one-year thing. It is about the system you create that's long-term, that can provide that consistency that you're looking for. Number 4, value all 3 phases of the game. Special teams matter. Now, I say this because, while it might seem like an obvious thing, special teams plays, it might not seem like a third of it, but a large part of the game. Whether that is field goals, whether that is punting, whether that is kickoff placement, field position matters. With special teams and the 3 phases, you control the tempo of the game. On offense, if you run a really run-heavy team, a run-heavy game, or you play with tempo, you're changing the pace of the game. You're changing and making your opponent adapt. If you can punt the ball really well, you can change the field position and make it more and more difficult for the team to progress. When you look at the Super Bowl, one of the best players on the field was the Seahawks punter. uh, Dickerson. Why? Because he kept pinning them deep. He made the Patriots, who couldn't run the ball, have to go drive the field, and they couldn't get past half midfield. They couldn't get across the 50. You look at the field goal team. If you make the field goals you're supposed to make, and suddenly, people are talking about, should Myers be player of the game? Winning the three phases creates a meshed play style that kind of allows you to do what you want to do. So you can control the tempo, you get the field position, and you create that meshed play style that allows you to be more fluid, more consistent. So some teams that kind of led and had some good special teams, and you look at their output this year, and again, there's an outlier here, but as I've talked about, players do matter too. 49ers, Bears, Bengals, Bills, and Broncos. So I hope you see already just there's a little bit of continuity between some of the teams you've seen of, can you perform and be kind of evaluated on multiple measures of team success, where you have players that can shine, right? But you look at the Bears, for instance. The Bears had a resounding turnover margin lead over the NFL. They forced turnovers, which didn't always help in the later games whenever they couldn't force them. But in terms of winning the three phases, they had a bunch of comebacks because they won the game in the three phases. The 49ers, without their star players, Mac Jones was dealing, they won the three phases. Same thing with the Bills. The Broncos had one of the best defenses in the league, a top special teams unit. And then the Bengals, who special teams was good, the offense was decent, the defense was really bad. So you really lose that sort of who knows. Look at the Cowboys, for instance. The Cowboys are a great team offensively for the most part. Special teams, they had one of the best kickers in the league. They had a good punter. The defense was horrendous. So if you can't marry the three games together, you don't have a winning team. And you won't have a winning team. Next, and this one is the most variable, but whenever I think of how do I build a winning team, it is building with a clear plan and strategy with your talent and your talent management and your talent acquisition. Having an identity and creating that sort of who are we, that brand, that idea. I'm going to list some teams, right? And each team is going to be built in a different way. Whenever you think of them, you're going to be like, oh, that makes sense. So as I was saying, you build consistency. That's a why. Because strategy breeds continuity. So you have the continued goal of, this is what we're going to do. You create clear windows to win or to rebuild, but you make it very defined. So some teams with clear strategies. The Seahawks. The Seahawks, their goal this year was to bring in talent from across the league. They went and drafted defensive players that fit the scheme they wanted. Whenever they got Mike McDaniel of, hey, what do you want? You want a Nick Emmanwori to kind of match the role that you had Kyle Hamilton in? Cool, we can do that. You want to go get DeMarcus Lawrence, who looks like he's not playing his best football, and you want to create a more dynamic defense? Sure. When you build that sort of, this is the strategy, this is what we're going to do, you go draft JSN, you go get Sam Darnold on a large contract, and say, this is what we want to be. We let Geno go. We want Sam Darnold. We want to be built in the run game. We have Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker. Everything makes sense when you look at Seattle's team. Next up, the Patriots. Now, the Patriots, whether you're looking at the dynasty or this year, they built through the draft. They've built upon homegrown talent. There's a meanness. There's a fire that Patriots players have. You look at Mike Vrabel, who's the coach now, played for Belichick. You look at Belichick, they have this demeanor, and you just know what you're getting. Every week, consistency. Not always the best teams, but even when they're bad, they have good moments because they are built with a strategy of, we're going to draft our players. They have a certain build they look for. And we make fun of it, like if there's a white guy that plays receiver, mock him to the Patriots. But whenever they do that, they kind of have what they're looking for, and they stick to that. Kraft has been good as an owner of creating a continued idea of what being a Patriot is and developing that pride. Next up, a team completely different, the Rams. The Rams are a sell-all type team. what have they done? Well, they've traded their first round picks. They have acquired more draft capital from other teams. They haven't drafted in the first round because they don't need to, and that's not their goal. They'll go make a big move where they go get Devontae Adams. They'll go stack multiple draft picks and not draft in the first round, and they'll go make smart signings. But the Rams' strategy is going all in for talent. They just gave large money to both starting cornerbacks from the Chiefs and said, we're going to go all in. That's who they are. I would not be surprised if they don't make more moves as the draft gets closer to say, this is who we are. We're going all in. We're going to maximize the window of Matthew Stafford. Even whenever we go to the Super Bowl and we go all in, right? We make the trade for the Goff trade. We beat the Bengals. Now what? Well, we're going to keep going. We're going to keep building on that. So the Rams. And then the last team, and it hurts me to say it, but they have an identity. When you think of draft, accusation, you think of big moves. One man comes in named Howie Roseman, and the Eagles have built a strategy. Currently, they they went and signed Saquon Barkley after he left the Giants. They traded for A.J. Brown. They have drafted in the late first round, and they've consistently drafted good players back in the back end because that's what they do. Whether it's Jahad Campbell, whether it is Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, Quinyon Mitchell. It does not matter. The Eagles draft players that they think will be around. Nakobe Dean. They draft good football players. And it's not always best player available or what looks like need, but they draft players that will be players and starters. And then they're willing to spend big money and then push it off to another year. And they've kind of built that system of being consistent. So as I went through each of these categories, I think it's very clear that you see a kind of trend of teams that are good and why they're good. From last year, the Seahawks, 49ers, Patriots, Rams, those teams are in a bunch of these categories over and over because they do the 5 things I mentioned at a high rate. And what did that result in? A Patriots versus Seahawks Super Bowl. So if I was a GM, if I was building a team, I think the 5 things you need to do if you want to be better next year and for the future, you run the ball and stop the run. You develop a non-penalized team with high discipline. You win the games that you should win with consistency. You value all 3 phases of a football game. So special teams matter and you build that cohesion and mesh the play style. And then you create a clear plan and strategy with talent and talent management. So you know what you're doing and you're not running into a contract issue or running into a situation where you don't have an identity. But anyway, you can apply this to any level of football. I can do this for college. I can do this for high school. Obviously, different levels of talent and kind of you can look at maybe scheme as a measure for success in high school, or you can look at NIL opportunities now for college or maybe conference and the prestige maybe. But anyway, these 5 things, at least on the NFL level, football in general, make or break a team. This is Teach Tape Tuesday. I do this every week where I try and go through what makes a good team, what makes a good player, what makes a good system, trying to understand for myself and to teach the basics of the sport so that you understand it too. If you like the video, leave a comment, subscribe if you're new, and let me know what you think. Let me know what you think I left off of the list. What do you think is the most important trait for football teams and players, and what do you see as a trend of this player is going to be good, this team's going to be good, this team's going to be bad, because that's what really matters. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed. Have a good rest of your day. If you made it to this video, watch the rest of the Teach Tape Tuesday, and I appreciate you. Have a good one.